Get away from here and wait outside. You have no business being here. The voice, sharp as shattered glass, cut through the quiet of the private terminal. It dripped with an authority so absolute it bordered on disgust. The senior flight attendant planted herself at the entrance of the jet, a human barricade. I will call security if you don't leave immediately, she snapped. People like you don't fly on jets like this. Vivian Carter stood motionless on the rain-slicked tarmac, the words washing over her. The silence that followed was a vacuum, pulling in the stares of the ground crew. Rain began to speckle the wings of the pristine Gulf Stream, and in that moment, a billionaire heiress stood face to face with an employee who had no idea she was speaking to the woman who owned the entire airline. The flight attendant, consumed by her own prejudice, had just made the single greatest mistake of her life. Just 12 hours earlier, Vivian had been in a London boardroom, the architect of a $3 billion international acquisition. Now, at 37, she was one of the most powerful and invisible women in aviation, rushing back to the States for her father's 70th birthday in the Hamptons. The Carter empire, built over 3 generations, was a titan of industry, spanning luxury hotels, tech firms, and one of North America's largest private aviation companies. Yet Vivian herself remained a ghost. No social media, no red carpet photos, no magazine interviews. She cultivated anonymity as carefully as her family cultivated its wealth, which was why she now found herself in this impossible situation. Her trouble had started an hour before, at the entrance to the first-class lounge. She'd arrived early, hoping for a moment of peace. The gatekeeper, a man named David, had stopped her with a raised hand. "Ma'am, this lounge is for first-class passengers only. Boarding pass and identification." His tone was dismissive, his eyes sweeping over her with bored suspicion. Vivian paused, taken aback by the aggression. She'd been using this lounge for over a decade. "Of course," she replied, her voice even as she retrieved her platinum membership card and boarding pass. David took the documents with theatrical skepticism, holding them up to the light as if they were forgeries. "These don't look right," he announced, his voice loud enough for his colleagues to hear. "Ma'am, I'm going to have to ask you to wait outside while we verify these. This lounge is reserved for our most exclusive clientele." "I assure you they're authentic," Vivian said, her composure a shield against the rising tide of public humiliation. "Do you understand what kind of facility this is?" David pressed on, warming to his role as protector of the privileged. "The membership fee is $50,000 a year. Our clients are Fortune 500 CEOs, heads of state, Hollywood royalty. They pay for privacy." As if on cue, a white man in his 60s dressed in casual golf attire ambled toward the entrance. David's demeanor instantly melted into deference. "Good afternoon, Mr. Patterson. Right on time for your flight to Miami. Please go right in." No request for ID, no scrutiny of his pass. The contrast was a deliberate, brutal stroke. "You see," David said, turning back to Vivian with a smug smile. "That's what our clientele looks like. Now, as I was saying, you'll need to wait outside." For 25 minutes, Vivian stood just beyond the glass doors as the rain began to fall in earnest. She watched as a parade of wealthy white passengers were waved through without a second glance. The message was clear. In David's eyes, her skin color was a disqualification that no platinum card could overcome. Finally, he slid the door open a few inches. "Ma'am," he announced, as if bestowing a great mercy, "due to the inclement weather, I've decided to grant you provisional access, but I want you to know we will be monitoring your behavior." Soaked and seething, Vivian walked into the lounge that bore her family's name. This wasn't just one man's prejudice, it was a sickness in the bones of her own company. An hour later, she approached the sleek $12 million jet, her heels clicking on the wet tarmac. At the aircraft's entrance stood Stephanie Williams, a senior flight attendant with 5 years of service. In that time, Stephanie had absorbed the arrogance of the world she served, confusing proximity to power with power itself. She had become an expert at making snap judgments about who belonged. The moment she saw a black woman walking confidently toward her aircraft, her mind was made up. Vivian's elegant trench coat, her expensive leather luggage, her air of quiet command, none of it registered. Stephanie saw only an intruder. "Excuse me," she called out, stepping forward to block Vivian's path. "This is a private aircraft. You can't just walk up here." Vivian paused, her gaze calm. "I'm here for the flight to Westchester." She reached for her credentials. Stephanie waved a dismissive hand. You don't look like the type of person who flies private. The commercial terminal is a mile that way. The insult hung in the damp air, sharp and poisonous. Nearby, ground crew members froze. In the cockpit, Captain Robert Hayes heard every word through the open window and deliberately turned away. It wasn't his problem. But Marcus Thompson, the ground operations supervisor, looked up from his checklist, a knot of concern tightening in his stomach. And Jennifer Kim, a junior crew member, watched in silent horror. "My boarding pass is right here," Vivian said, her voice still a low, steady hum. Stephanie barely glanced at it. "These could be fake. Do you have any idea what it costs to charter this aircraft? $75,000. Does that sound like something you can afford?" A flicker of something hard and dangerous entered Vivian's eyes. "I believe there's been a misunderstanding." "The only misunderstanding," Stephanie shot back, her voice rising, "is you thinking you belong anywhere near this jet. Security." David Palmer, the terminal manager, came jogging over. Sizing up the situation with a single, prejudiced glance, he sided instantly with his employee. "Ma'am, you need to leave this area immediately." "I am a passenger," Vivian stated. The control in her voice was fraying, revealing an edge of tempered steel. "Right," Stephanie laughed, "and I'm the Queen of England. Look, lady, this isn't some commercial flight where you can sneak on with a fake ticket. These are serious people with serious money." The rain was falling harder now, plastering strands of hair to Vivian's face. "Serious people like me?" she asked quietly. "People like you don't fly private," Stephanie sneered. "Now get out of here before I have you arrested." Marcus Thompson finally stepped forward. "Stephanie, maybe we should just verify her credentials properly." "Stay out of this, Marcus," she snapped. "I know how to do my job. I care about the reputation of this company." And that's when Vivian Carter smiled. It was not a friendly smile. It was the smile of a queen on a chessboard, watching her opponent walk directly into a trap. "You care about the reputation of this company?" she asked, her voice deadly calm as she pulled out her phone. The accommodating passenger vanished, replaced by a woman who commanded boardrooms and dismantled corporations. "In that case," she said, dialing a number, "I think it's time we discuss the reputation you've been building." As the phone began to ring, a sliver of doubt finally pierced the armor of Stephanie's and David's certainty. Captain Hayes stirred in the cockpit, a cold premonition creeping over him. This was more than a passenger dispute. Jennifer Kim, the junior crew member, moved closer. She was young, but she'd worked at a luxury hotel before this, and she knew what old money looked like. It wasn't loud or flashy, it was quiet, understated, and confident. It was the perfect fit of a handmade coat, the subtle gleam of a vintage watch, the easy posture of someone who had never had to prove they belonged. It was the woman standing before them, being treated like a criminal. The phone connected. Vivian's eyes, cold and focused, never left Stephanie's face. "Hello," she said, her voice ringing with absolute authority. "This is Vivian Carter. Connect me to the board of directors immediately." The name, Carter, hit the air like a thunderclap. In the world of aviation, it meant only one thing, but it couldn't be. Stephanie, blinded by a lifetime of assumptions, heard the name and chose disbelief. Instead of backing down, she doubled down on her career-ending mistake. "Carter?" she scoffed. "Oh, so now you're related to the Carter family? What's next? You own the company?" David Palmer chuckled, crossing his arms. "Ma'am, I've been in private aviation for 15 years. I know what wealth looks like. And you," he said, looking her up and down with open contempt, "are not it." The absurdity of the statement, coming from a man who earned less in a year than Vivian's coat was worth, was almost comical. But Vivian didn't laugh. A cold, furious clarity settled over her. This was no longer just about her. It was about every person of color who had ever been told they didn't belong. She had the power to not just end this humiliation, but to burn out the rot that caused it. She would let them continue. She would let them build their own funeral pyre, word by ignorant word. "And what, exactly," Vivian asked, her voice soft and dangerous, "does wealth look like to you?" Despite her junior status and the very real risk to her career, Jennifer approached the spot where Vivian was standing. "Ma'am," she began quietly, "I am so sorry about this. Is there anything at all I can do? I could call the main office, try to sort this out for you." It was a small gesture, but in that moment, it was everything. In the midst of a systematic humiliation, one person had chosen to see her humanity. One person was willing to risk their own position to do what was right. "Thank you," Vivian said, her voice soft. "Your kindness means more than you can possibly know, but I believe this situation needs to play out exactly as it is." Jennifer didn't understand, but something in Vivian's tone suggested this story was far from over. Meanwhile, Stephanie's composure was beginning to fray. She had given this woman multiple chances to leave gracefully, but instead, Vivian was standing her ground. This was escalating into a genuine security issue. "Ma'am, I am calling airport security," Stephanie announced, her voice loud and sharp. "You are trespassing on private property and refusing to leave." "I am trespassing?" Vivian repeated, her voice still eerily calm. "On private property?" "Yes, this is a private aviation terminal. Access is restricted to authorized personnel and passengers only." Vivian nodded thoughtfully. "And you are absolutely certain I am not an authorized passenger?" "I've checked your so-called credentials," Stephanie scoffed. "They don't match our passenger manifest, and frankly, they look suspicious." What Stephanie didn't know was that on the manifest, Vivian's name was listed simply as V. Carter. No first name, no title. It was a security measure the family had used for decades. But Stephanie was searching for her mental image of what a Carter should be, and the poised black woman before her simply did not fit. "You know what?" Vivian said, retrieving her phone once more. "I think it's time I made a call of my own." As she dialed, Vivian's entire demeanor shifted. The patient, accommodating passenger vanished, replaced by someone far more formidable. Her voice took on a tone accustomed to being obeyed without question. "Hello, I am at Westchester County Airport," Vivian stated clearly, "and I'm experiencing what can only be described as systematic discrimination from our employees. Yes, our employees." The color drained from Stephanie's face. Something in the way Vivian said "our employees" began to penetrate her walls of prejudice. "I want a full investigation launched immediately," Vivian continued, her voice gaining strength. "I want security footage from the last 30 minutes pulled, and a complete review of hiring and training practices in the private aviation division." Just then, Captain Hayes emerged from the cockpit, realizing this had escalated far beyond a simple passenger dispute. As he drew closer, he overheard Vivian's side of the conversation, and his blood ran cold. "No, I don't think suspension is sufficient," she was saying. "We're looking at immediate termination for cause. This is precisely the kind of liability exposure the board has been worried about. Yes, I'll hold for the chairman." Vivian lowered the phone and looked directly at Stephanie. "He's pulling the employment files for everyone involved in this incident." The silence that followed was absolute. All around them, other passengers and crew had started to notice the commotion, sensing that something major was unfolding at the Carter Aviation Terminal. Marcus Thompson, the operations supervisor, finally approached, his face a mask of concern. He knew he should have intervened sooner. His conscience had been screaming at him, but he'd chosen the safer path of staying out of it. Now, he realized his silence might cost him his career. "Stephanie," Marcus began quietly, "maybe we should reconsider." "Reconsider what?" she snapped, though her voice had lost its earlier confidence. The authority in Vivian's voice, the casual mention of board meetings and corporate liability, it felt terrifyingly authentic. David Palmer was having similar doubts. He had built a career on reading people, on knowing who belonged. But the woman's composure under pressure, her quiet refinement, the way she spoke with such authority. What if they had made a terrible mistake? "Ma'am," David said carefully, "perhaps there has been a misunderstanding." "A misunderstanding?" Vivian interrupted, lowering her phone. "You've accused me of fraud and trespassing. You've publicly humiliated me and threatened to have me arrested. What part of that do you consider a misunderstanding?" The rain was falling harder now, soaking her expensive coat and plastering her hair to her head. "The chairman will see me now," Vivian said, raising the phone to her ear. "Yes, sir, I'm still here, standing in the rain, actually. It seems your employees have decided I don't look like the kind of person who should be allowed on a Carter Aviation aircraft." As Vivian spoke, the full, devastating realization dawned on everyone present. This wasn't someone pretending to be important. This was someone who was important. Captain Hayes approached Stephanie, panic in his eyes. Stephanie, what manifest are you looking at? The standard one, she replied, her voice barely a whisper. There's no Vivian Carter listed. Show me, Hayes demanded. Stephanie held out her tablet. At the very top of the passenger list was a single entry, V. Carter, owner, CEO. The silence that followed was the sound of careers ending. Captain Hayes stared at the screen, then at Vivian, then back at the screen. 23 years in aviation, and he had just watched his crew discriminate against the owner of the company. Oh God, he whispered. Oh my God. David Palmer saw their expressions and his stomach dropped. He didn't need to ask. Vivian's phone call was providing all the answers he needed. Stephanie sank onto a nearby equipment crate, the full weight of her actions crashing down on her. She had just spent 30 minutes harassing a member of the Carter family, one of the most powerful families in American business, in front of witnesses, with security cameras recording her every word. Vivian ended her call and surveyed the group. Her expression wasn't angry. It was something far more dangerous. It was disappointed. Now, she said quietly, I believe someone mentioned calling security. I think that's an excellent idea. I'd like to file a formal complaint. The rain continued to fall, but Vivian Carter was no longer just standing in it. She was standing in the wreckage of several careers, and the storm about to hit Carter Aviation Group would make this weather feel like a gentle spring shower. First, she called her executive assistant, Sarah Chen. Sarah, it's me, Vivian said, her voice controlled but edged with steel. Cancel the Manchester meeting. Vivian, are you sure? Sarah asked, shocked. That's a $3 billion deal. Cancel it, Vivian repeated firmly. Clear my schedule for the next week. We're going to be rebuilding our entire corporate culture, and it starts today. Her second call was to Michael Torres, head of security. Michael, I need all security footage from Terminal 7 for the last hour, she said without preamble. Pulled, secured, and prepared for legal review. How serious are we talking? Torres asked. Career-ending serious. Lawsuit serious. Federal discrimination complaint serious. Her third call was to her brother, Marcus Carter, the company's COO. Marcus, I need you to drop everything and get to Westchester County Airport, Vivian said. Bring the legal team. Bring HR. What's going on? Marcus asked, alarmed by the tension in her voice. I'm standing in the rain because our employees have decided I don't look like the kind of person who belongs on a private jet. The silence on the other end was deafening. I'll be there in 30 minutes, Marcus said, his voice dangerously quiet. Marcus, bring the termination paperwork. We're going to need it. Just as Vivian ended the call, a black Mercedes S-Class swept up to the terminal, followed by two other vehicles. Marcus Carter stepped out, his resemblance to Vivian unmistakable. Behind him emerged a team of lawyers, HR executives, and corporate security. This was not a response team. This was the corporate equivalent of an army. The head of airport security jogged over to Vivian. Ma'am, we've reviewed the footage. We have everything documented. Marcus approached his sister, a mixture of fury and heartbreak in his eyes. Vivian, he said softly, I am so sorry. Don't apologize to me, she replied, her voice ice. Apologize to every passenger who has ever been treated this way. Apologize to the shareholders who are about to watch this company's reputation get destroyed. He turned to Stephanie and David, his expression terrifying. Which one of you, Marcus asked, his voice low and menacing, told my sister she doesn't belong on her own aircraft? Vivian stepped forward and began walking toward the jet. She was no longer a passenger hoping to board a flight. She was the CEO of Carter Aviation Group, and the transformation was absolute. Everyone involved in this incident, Vivian announced, her voice ringing with authority, will report to the aircraft's conference room immediately. Inside the luxurious cabin, Vivian took her seat at the head of the conference table, flanked by her legal and HR teams. Across from her sat Stephanie, David, and Captain Hayes, looking like defendants awaiting sentencing. I want to understand, Vivian began, her voice quiet but heavy, how my own employees could treat anyone the way you treated me today. She turned her gaze to Stephanie. Explain to me what you saw that made you believe I didn't belong on this aircraft. Stephanie could barely find her voice. Ma'am, I thought... You thought what? Vivian's voice was deadly calm. That a black woman couldn't possibly own a private jet? That wealth has a particular color? I didn't know who you were. Vivian leaned forward. That is precisely the problem, she said. the devastation in her voice more powerful than any shout. You should treat everyone with respect, regardless of who they are. The fact that you only regret your behavior now because of who I am proves you have completely missed the point. This was never just about a single incident. This was about a culture, one that had allowed such insidious behavior to fester in the shadows. David. Vivian's voice was calm, yet it sliced through the tension in the cabin. She turned to the terminal manager. You told me you know what wealth looks like. You said I wasn't it. I would like you to explain that assessment to my legal team. The color drained from David Palmer's face. He looked as if he might be physically ill. Ms. Carter, I sincerely apologize. If you had known what? Vivian interrupted, her gaze unwavering. That I was the owner? That I was wealthy? That I was important? David, the problem isn't that you didn't know who I was. The problem is that you think it should matter. As the quiet interrogation unfolded, other truths began to surface, like hairline fractures spreading through glass. Stephanie was forced to admit she had made similar assumptions about other passengers in the past. David revealed a pattern of profiling that had been an unspoken policy for years. Captain Hayes confessed that he had witnessed discrimination before, but had always chosen the safety of silence. Through it all, Marcus Carter sat quietly, taking notes, his pen scratching against the paper. He watched his sister systematically dismantle the careers of people who had brought shame to their family name. As COO, he knew he would be the one to implement the changes that would ensure this could never happen again. The security footage, Vivian announced, her voice resonating with finality, has captured every moment of the last hour. Every discriminatory comment, every baseless assumption, every moment of humiliation. That footage will be reviewed by federal investigators, by our legal team, and by every single employee in this company as part of mandatory, non-negotiable training. The weight of consequence, real and irrevocable, began to settle upon them. This wasn't going to be a quiet personnel matter, handled discreetly and internally. This was going to be a public reckoning, a storm that would reshape the entire industry. Stephanie Williams, Vivian said, the formality of her tone making it all the more brutal. Your employment with Carter Aviation Group is terminated, effective immediately. David Palmer, your employment is terminated, effective immediately. Captain Hayes, you are suspended without pay pending a full investigation. The words fell like hammer blows. Careers that had taken decades to build were shattered in a single sentence. But Vivian wasn't finished. This incident has exposed a deep cultural rot that goes far beyond a few individuals, she continued, her voice gaining strength. We will implement company-wide changes to guarantee this is an isolated event. Every employee will undergo rigorous implicit bias training. Every manager will be retrained on our core values. And we are creating new, anonymous reporting systems that will protect and amplify the voices of anyone who experiences the kind of treatment I endured today. As the meeting concluded and the terminated employees were escorted from the aircraft, Vivian finally allowed herself a moment. She had been humiliated, profiled, and treated like a trespasser by her own people. But in the ashes of that humiliation, she had forged a lesson that would redefine her company. The rain had stopped. Through the aircraft windows, she could see other passengers and crew members watching, their faces a mixture of fear and awe. Word was already spreading. By tomorrow, this would be front-page news. For now, Vivian Carter was finally going home to her father's birthday party, carrying with her the heavy satisfaction of knowing she had just made her company and her industry a better place. She had proven that the most powerful response to discrimination was to simply give people the space to reveal exactly who they were and then hold them accountable for it. Justice moved through Carter Aviation Group like a cleansing fire. Within 24 hours, the corporate world witnessed what happens when prejudice meets unyielding consequence. Stephanie Williams found herself not just fired, but effectively blacklisted from the aviation industry. David Palmer suffered the same fate, with the added humiliation of being permanently barred from working with any Carter-affiliated company. And Captain Hayes, whose silence had been a form of complicity, found his distinguished career frozen in an indefinite suspension, a monument to the cost of inaction. But accountability was a double-edged sword. The heroes of that day were rewarded just as swiftly. Marcus Thompson, the operations supervisor whose conscience had finally triumphed over his fear, was promoted to regional operations director. Jennifer Kim, the junior ground crew member who had offered a simple act of human decency, was offered a management track position and a full scholarship to aviation school. These individual actions were just the first tremors of a seismic shift. Within a week, Vivian implemented a complete overhaul of company culture. An anonymous reporting system, managed by an independent third party, went live. Undercover assessments by external diversity consultants became standard practice. Comprehensive bias training, designed by leading experts, became mandatory for every employee, from baggage handlers to the board of directors. Carter Aviation became the first in the industry to use AI systems to monitor customer service interactions for discriminatory patterns, and established a victim advocacy program to provide immediate legal and emotional support. For Vivian, the incident triggered a profound realization. Her family's long-held philosophy of maintaining a low profile had inadvertently allowed a toxic culture to flourish. She stepped out of the shadows, conducting surprise visits to terminals and speaking directly with frontline employees. When she finally arrived at her father's 70th birthday celebration, 3 hours late and emotionally drained, Charles Carter took one look at his daughter and knew something profound had occurred. As Vivian recounted the day's events, her father's initial fury gave way to a deep, resonant pride. "You turned the worst day of your career," he told her, "into its most important lesson. Your mother would be so proud." The ripple effects of that one afternoon spread far and wide. The incident became a Harvard Business School case study. Other aviation companies scrambled to implement similar policies, terrified of facing their own public reckoning. The woman who had spent her life avoiding the spotlight became one of the most respected voices on corporate responsibility in America. Perhaps the most remarkable twist came 6 months later. Stephanie Williams, having lost everything, wrote a raw, public letter of apology. It was a devastating acknowledgement of her own prejudices and the harm they had caused. In a move that stunned the business world, Vivian offered her not a job, but a chance at redemption. An opportunity to become a part of Carter Aviation's diversity training, sharing her story as a cautionary tale. True leadership, Vivian explained to a stunned boardroom, must include a path to redemption alongside accountability. To change a culture, we need to understand it from every angle. 1 year after that rainy afternoon, Carter Aviation Group was the gold standard for inclusive business practices. Vivian Carter had proven that the most powerful response to injustice isn't just revenge, it's revolution. It all started because one woman refused to be told she didn't belong on her own airplane. As her father had said in his birthday speech that night, "Power without purpose is just privilege, but power with purpose can change the world." Vivian Carter had not only changed her world, she had started to change everyone else's too.